Can you hear me now? Testing, 1, 2, 3. I will, of course, edit all of this out at some point because, you know. So we're, what, 23 minutes in. I haven't done anything except try to figure out this stupid video setting because I still haven't mastered OBS or anything else for that matter. Yes, loud and clear. Excellent, excellent. All right. I wonder if I can get this thing to work a little better. Yeah, I really wish this was a tighter shot. I don't know what's going on with OBS or why it's like so. Here we go. Let me see if I can get this into the screen. Oh, I see what they did there. All right, let me see. Hairy arms. Beastly hairy arms. All right. And belly. Beastly hairy belly. You can call me Hairy Belly Fonte. All right, let's see here. How about more this way? No, let me get the shadow of the camera in there. All right. How about more this way? That's a little better. I mean, not really that much better, to be honest. Where are we here? Over here. Some blank space. Well, anyway, let's just get this party started. I think this is about as good as it's going to get. Nice one. Got it sorted. Not. That's kind of you to say. Beast Fontia? Beast of Fontia? Fonte. All right. Okay. So, yeah. The purpose of our gathering here today is to speak about droids. Not the kind filled with gin, but, oh, that's going to be a problem. So as soon as my hand goes in there, it goes out of focus. Oh, if it's one thing, it's not, it's another. So what I was looking at is the BJD, which I think I'm going to have to write backwards if I'm doing this right. And I'm waiting for the screen to catch up with me. There we go. Good Lord. So let me see if this is the correct way. So frustrating. I have to literally wait 10. This delay is ludicrous. All right, well that is the correct way, but so BJD. I'm writing backwards and upside down in order for everybody to see this. So it looks like the J didn't come out right. Okay. Oh, so just backwards then. So BJD. Yeah, that looks good. All right, so BJD stands for, you guessed it, ball jointed doll. You guys tell me, I mean, is there a big delay between what I'm saying and what goes on the screen? I'm just curious. So if I go put my fingers up and go testing 1, 2, 3, and I put 3 fingers up right now, 3 fingers on the screen. All right. Anyway. And what that basically means is anytime you've got a figure, let's say like I mean, you can. There, I wouldn't say ball joints are used everywhere in toys or model making, but some variation of it or some variation of the concept is. You've got hinged joints, which is kind of what this is over here. It's just a basic hinge joint. You have one axis, right, with a single point of articulation. So what you're looking at is a joint that just does this, right? It's going to move one direction or the other. It's not going to do much of anything else. So you've got your axis here inside of a cylinder, and that cylinder is attached at some point to 2 stems, right? So, and they're usually going to be something configured like a little insert this way, and then they're connected that way, right? And everybody knows that. So you got one point of articulation. Oh, that's not even showing up on the camera. Of course not. Why would it? There we go. So this is what I'm talking about here. And that's fine. I think for a lot of things, a lot of simple toys, that's fine. Then you have a typical toy that would be something along the lines of, let's say this is a torso, and you've got a head and some arms, and I'm just kind of exaggerating it. You know, the arms have a socket connection, right? And they might be T-shaped. And, you know, sorry if this is like super fundamental and primitive, but I mean, just for anyone who doesn't know, I know you guys that are on already probably understand perfectly fine about this stuff. So I'll get to the more advanced stuff here in a little bit. But yeah, you're using a connection that's sort of like this. It's more of a sort of a nail. So you've got a head that is held in place inside the hole by this sort of a connection. A lot of times they'll put a little arrow in here like that. So what you end up with is kind of a conical end, so that they can push it through a smaller hole, and then and this is usually a soft plastic or soft vinyl material of some sort, and then, you know, the arm's connected to the other side. And so what that does is that conical section gets pushed into like a small hole on the torso to go in. But I mean, anybody who's ever owned an action figure is familiar with this. If you were a kid and you had even if you weren't the type that played with the G.I. Joes, you played with Barbies or some other type of doll. You know, they had a similar connection. It might have been a different shape, but the concept was the same. So in a lot of large dolls, they would have, like, say this is a doll arm. This doll arm would have some kind of piece that was, say, from a profile was shaped like this, right? So here's the hand. There's the arm. It might have a piece that's sort of shaped like that sticking out of it. So even for those of you that played with other types of figures, the concepts are pretty much the same. So we're up to speed on that. And a lot of these things, I mean, anybody who's owned a toy or been in the toy business, or specifically like a lot of the G.I. Joe dolls that came out in the late 80s, early 90s, early 2000s, I mean, I have to say the manufacturers or designers of those really came up with a lot of cool stuff. So I mean, you've got the type of joints that you see there, which are still pretty fundamentally important, I think. So what you have is a shoulder piece. You might have a sort of a, this is the upper arm, right? You might have a piece that looks like this. And then the other piece that fits into it, the lower arm or forearm. And then I think they even have something like G.I. Joe dolls have something like along the lines of what's called a rotating grip or something like that. So they've taken the rotation from that upper arm piece, and I wish I had some examples to show you. I probably should post some on a monitor. Let me see here. So there are multiple points of articulation on these toys. Let's find a good picture. Okay, fair warning, guys. This might be there might be some naked doll nudity here. They're not in any way anatomically correct, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I think it'll kind of show my point. Let's see here. Oh, that didn't work. All right. Let me see. Let's look at display capture. All right. I'm not real sure why that's, there we go. So what you're seeing here, if I'm doing this right, is, let me put this over here. So I can see what I'm doing too. You've got, this is an older G.I. Joe doll. This is a newer one. They both have this kind of similar section in there. What this amounts to is, we can do this. So inside these things, and I know some of you have probably taken these apart, you've got the the single point of articulation on one axis with two items. So you've got this kind of offset version with the axis of the swivel going through here, and then on these other pieces, You've got something like, usually it's like a hook and latch kind of thing with, I think it was originally some sort of rubber band or elastic band that was in there. So there would be a piece that went like this, if I remember right. And there was an elastic that they would put in there. Let's say it's this black point, and then we connect to these points here. This point would connect somewhere inside the body, and the feet had a lot of articulation that way. So I think it maybe was something like this. But yeah, this was kind of a sort of a ball joint setup. And you notice that there's no articulation. Oops, let me get that up. There's no articulation up here. So right here, it's just a solid piece. But if you look at this later one, they kind of trim this down. And this is actually from an article about a lot of the updates in these G.I. Joe figures. And I'll get away from G.I. Joe here in a minute, but it's kind of important to look at. So you've got sort of a ball joint, a better ball joint set up here with the shoulders. You notice there's kind of a similar setup here. I think these are also connected with some sort of elastic. But if you notice right there, there's a point of rotation now that wasn't there before in this one instead of the solid piece, which is kind of one of those original kind of doll setups where they had that small shaft with the expanded end so they could wedge it in there. Although I think they did that with a two-piece setup. So that was one point. Then later, let me see here. With the BJD stuff, and again, BJD is just like a lot of you already guessed, is a ball jointed doll. They started doing a lot more articulation. One of the companies that really, like with the G.I. Joes, that started with very simple or pretty basic. Also, it's worth noting on this doll, there's a kind of a large scoop right here. This is a separate piece from the torso, and with these elastic bands, this torso and even here was able to bend in crazy directions. You could turn the guy into a contortionist. Was Bandai in the 90s and the early 2000s started incorporating that sort of subframe or skeleton for their Gundam robots, their giant mecha. And let me see if I can find a good one for that. I think the most recent version of that, I mean, they've gotten pretty crazy with their articulation. I was going to place this guy in here as an example. So there's a good example of a Gundam. Okay. Let me shrink this down. There we go. So, but they don't have any ball joints. There's no the old German sex worker doll. God. Yeah, there's no ball joints in this. They did this all with a lot of those really simple hinges, but they just put a hell of a lot of them in there. So you've got an axis here, you've got an axis coming through here, you've got a rotational point in this section here, I mean, they really went crazy. I think this looks like it might be a ball joint, but it's not. It's just a shape of a ball. There's actually just another point of rotation in there. And then they've got another one there, another one there. I mean, it's crazy. There's one there. And we'll get into this, what this is right here. So this is, and you'll see this in these BJD dolls I'll show you in a minute. This is what's referred to as a double jointed section. So on the figure itself, they give you the illusion of having a point of rotation by putting this sort of a plastic detail, circular detail here. But in reality, that detail is just doesn't mean anything. It's really not connected to anything, and it doesn't articulate at all. The point of rotation is in this axis, and likely I think it's somewhere around here. So what they did there is, unlike the G.I. Joe doll where you had a single point of rotation. So let's see if I can do this quick. Right? It's kind of like I drew earlier. So here's two sections of leg. There's a point of rotation here. Well, what the double ball joint does is, instead of this being a part of one of these two sections, this becomes an entirely separate piece, and you've got an axis going this way, so you can rotate this side, and then a second axis going through here. And I say axis. I keep saying axis and axes. So what you end up with is actually a three-piece double jointed section, which allows for crazy positioning of the leg like that. You could never get with... Is this thing on? Yeah. What? Oh. So yeah, you end up with a lot more articulation than you would ever get normally. But yeah, even though this thing's got some crazy dance moves, looks like there's maybe one ball joint here. But the amount of ball joints they use in these robots, and I think that's likely because it is still a robot. I think maybe they might have put a ball joint in there. And that's the big difference. The difference between a ball joint and this type of hinge joint is, in a ball joint, instead of this axis, you've got a cup that everything fits into. So this would be a sort of an indention in here, right? Let's do it on this side. We'll start with this box. And then this box here. In a ball joint configuration, let's call this one green, so we can see which one's which. What you end up with is something that's more like that, right? A little cup of some kind. And there is a section that will end up going in here. This little ball, which is still attached to usually some kind of rod. Right? And what that allows for is this kind of nice swinging motion in 360 degrees. So while you don't get this sort of crazy movement that you would here, this type of ball joint, a single ball joint, is only going to allow up to a point where this piece intersects with this piece. So in other words, your limitation on the rotation here is going to be wherever these two pieces are going to interfere with each other, right? Which you don't really have with this, because you're sort of more dependent on where these axis points are. These cylinders that are, if I were to draw this at an angle, you know, you can actually bring this down more, but yeah, these would kind of be something like that if you're looking at a side view. What a double ball joint does, and what you will see in some of these BJD dolls, which I'll show you in a second, is a double ball joint does the same thing that this does here. So you've got 2 points of axis, but instead of the, you know, axle with the double hinge and this sort of like puzzle piece connection, you end up with something that looks a lot like a ball with a ball and then well, an egg. Something that's sort of like this, and this is all one piece. It's sort of a dumbbell configuration, right? You've got two balls on the end of a sort of a you know, connector there, and then those interact with two separate areas. So let me see if I can grab you guys one of those. All right. And I have to give credit to some of the images here. I mean, obviously, this isn't my property. This is a Gundam toy. I don't I don't work for Bandai. I don't make Gundam toys. Some of these images are off Pinterest, so it's kind of hard to pinpoint where the actual sources were. But I mean, you know, you go to AliExpress or someplace like that, and they're not exactly going to be telling you where these pictures they took in China came from. Half of them are probably stolen from other manufacturers anyway, as far as I know. Yeah, a single ball joint's going to look something like this. Let me see if I can grab a picture real quick. And again, there's different versions of this, but this is one version of it. Let me see. Oh, that's a terrible picture. It's too small. Let's see if I can find a large one. Probably be easier if I drew this one, but let's see here. Let's see what I can find. Now, the trade-off with some of these single and double ball joints is, to me anyway, is kind of some aesthetics. You lose a lot of the posability with a single ball joint that you get with a double, but the single ball joint I think looks a little bit more natural. Let me see here. All right. All right, well, here's a good example of a double, if this isn't too bad. Copy. All right, So this is basically a double ball joint that they've got going on here, and I'll show you what I mean in a second. So here, just kind of like with those G.I. Joe dolls I was talking about earlier, all of this is held together with a very elastic band. I don't know to what degree it connects on the inside, but typically what I've seen is there's two elastic bands. So that band will go from all the way from this lower torso into the knee and extend all the way down to the feet. So this is literally all one piece of, I guess, rubber, for lack of a better word. I don't know exactly what the band's made of. Likely some kind of elastic rubber. It goes all the way from here all the way down, and then there's another one that goes up, and there's two loops that connect the arms for these. So these are all one piece of rubber. That's one piece of rubber. This is one piece, and there's another one for the other leg. The double ball joint comes in over here, and what's nice about these is, unlike with the Gundam, there's no axes or rod or shaft that has to go through the leg. It's literally just this ball and this ball. So if I were to say draw this, see if I can get in there. This shape of this item is like this. It looks like a kidney bean. And the ball is right here and right here. And then what they've done on this one, which is kind of nice, is they sort of scooped out this section on the leg on top and bottom, and they've made like a little knee piece that they've sculpted there. So there's no like rod or access point that goes through here. It's just a ball and a ball. And oops. You can see where that little sculpted knee piece is. And what this allows you to do is, completely bend this leg down into this sort of very natural looking position. On what they did on the other one, on the foot, is it looks like it's just a basic ball joint. So this is a good example of a single ball joint. And you'll notice there's kind of like obvious limitations to how far it can rotate out. Oh, are you not able to see this? Was I'm looking at the live stream and I can see most of this picture. Oh, you're probably talking about the Gundam. I don't know, maybe. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. No, it was probably really hard for me to see that. Dang it. Sorry about that, guys. I should have been paying attention. I've only got the two screens, and it's kind of hard to follow with this, so I apologize. I haven't mastered OBS, and frankly, I'm not a fan. It's just it's too much to anyway. That's why I don't like. The other reason is I don't like to schedule these ahead of time. Is it doesn't configure the way I like. It's easier for me just to get everything sorted out and then start up. And the last two times I've tried to schedule, this is what happened, and I apologize. So it's the sides of the drawings. The sides of the drawings. Oh, the sides. I got you. So let me see how far out it goes. Looks like the cutoff for me is right. Looks like here. It's about right here. Okay. I'm just making a little window for myself. All right, so now I know. Now I know where my exit points are. I think I can fix that here. Let me see. Oh, I see. Yeah. All right. So going back to what I was saying, yeah, the double ball joint has a lot of advantages, but I think one of the unfortunate things about it, even with that super high point of articulation, is you end up with some kind of weird anatomical shapes, which I guess for a doll maker, it's not that big a deal. But for someone, I mean, in other words, they're going to cover it up with clothing usually, usually. But I think for someone who wants to make a sort of more realistic looking figure, it's really hard to beat the anatomical look of a solid sculpted figure. The unfortunate part of that is you can't pose it. So you get the best of both worlds. I think with a lot of these. Let me see what I can find. I wanted to show you a picture of the difference between a single and a double ball joint on a figure because, so here's a real good example. Let me see. This is a pretty good size image too. All right, so let me zoom out of this. All right, and once again, there's nudity here, so brace yourself. All right, so this is an example of kind of some of the weirdness you get with that double ball joint, right? You see the double ball joint here in the knee. They did a real nice job of sculpting it out. Let me wait for the camera to catch up so I can see if I'm showing you guys what I need to show you. Okay, good. So you've got a double ball joint here, right? And you get that sort of weird lima bean shape front end. You've got what looks like a double ball joint. This could just be, it's kind of hard to tell. This might just be a double. Yeah, I think it is. All right, so you've got two there. They just did a really nice job of sculpting that knee out and hiding it. You've got a single. We'll make singles orange. So oops. Looks like probably a single here, a single there. This one looks like it's got maybe a single with a hinge. And looks like they put double ball joints in these ankles. Or single ball joints, sorry. So again, the we're going to say the orange ones are single ball joint sections, right? And then there is one other type of they've got kind of, I don't know if this is, I guess this is kind of considered another socket and ball joint, is where the torso connects right here. So what's going on in there is, again, they're using elastic. So they've got a rubber band that kind of goes through here, and then they've got two that goes, there's one that goes all the way through the entire leg. You've got another one that goes through this entire arm. And then right here, they've actually got another point of positioning. And I've seen where they've got a ball here in the abdomen, which it usually becomes like literally this sort of bottom section becomes another point of articulation, which is kind of cool. So what you end up with is a sort of a very natural cup shape here. And then another also kind of natural cup shape because you're going underneath the bottom of the rib cage and into that hip section. So this becomes a piece that's attached to this piece. And then this piece, rather than putting it under the boobs in this case, which I think that's still fine, this becomes a whole section. So you've got number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then you've got a double ball joint, a leg, another double ball joint, a leg, a single ball joint. And I've even seen some where they go through the trouble of putting some articulation in the toes by putting a real basic hinged area. This one looks like it's got the toes kind of sectioned out. So my kind of reason behind all of this was, I mean, these look really complex. The amount of articulation that goes into these, I mean, that these things are capable of is just, it's pretty amazing. But as complicated and as complex as they seem, they're not really all that hard to put together. I think it's kind of it almost seems like magic when they're creating these things. Let me see if I've got this is another one I wanted to show you guys. Let me see here. All right, so we looked at the double ball joints. This is what the same kind of doll with single ball joints looks like. So again, instead of this big kind of weird lima bean figure 8 sort of thing, or gourd shaped piece like you have on the elbows, the knees, here it's just one ball. So you've got just one ball here in between these two socketed sections. Same thing here. You notice it's not quite as large or extended as this part here. So you know that's a single. Same thing, single ball joint. Here there's probably just a very basic head piece that comes in like that. My goal, at least for me anyway, is to replicate this using a much more simple take on the way they build it. I've seen some folks online that have been able to sculpt these by hand on their own. I don't even think you really necessarily have to go that far. I think you could probably get away with doing something a little bit different, using sort of a lot of the beads that I know a lot of you tend to use. Let me see here. So let's go back this way. So basically, you've got the double ball setup, where they have some, you see those lines inside them like this. These are just slits cut into the ends to allow the elastic to pass through to its final destination. So there's, joint number 1 here. So this might be a knee section, for instance. And then, where they've sculpted that little knee piece. All right, so granted, this is kind of more of a complicated piece for, I think, some people. But it doesn't have to be. If you were to get a couple of wooden beads or plastic beads, whatever, all you really need to do is take bead number 1, take bead number 2, connect them with either a piece of wire or a wooden, I'd say wire would be best because you can give it a little bit more of a bend if you need to. You just drill a little hole into it. Actually, you wouldn't even necessarily have to do this, but this is like a real basic way. Drill a little hole in it and then put a piece of wire in there and you're essentially good to go. My thoughts on that are it'd probably be better to, rather than just hook up those two and then, of course, wrap them with some sort of a epoxy or clay or something, is take bead number 1, preferably wood, just because, I prefer wood. It's a lot easier to drill through and fix. You don't have to worry about, well, what kind of plastic is it? Will the glue hold? Plus, if you're going to use something like, it gives you more options if you're going to use something like Super Sculpey or Fimo, which has to be baked. If you use plastic, obviously that's going to melt. So let me get the camera in here a little bit more. So here's your bead. Here's your other bead. What you can do is put a little piece of clay in between them. If you need to put a thin wire, maybe put a very thin wire on one side, close to the edge. So a piece of wire here, just to hold them in place. But wrap that in Fimo or Super Sculpey or something, up to about right there. And then just bake it. And then once you've baked it, very carefully, get a drill and just drill a hole straight through both of them. So you've got your hole where and then you could probably just, take your bead and file or cut with a small saw a little slot in there, just like you saw in the pictures. So what you end up with is something like this for that knee section or arm. I think they use this for the shoulder. Not the shoulder, the knee, the hips, where they connect to the legs, the elbows. You can use it wherever you wanted. These guys here with the single ball joint, that's the easiest part in the world. It's literally just a ball, so you can just use a bead. A lot of beads already have holes in them, so boom, done. You're already finished. Though I think the reason they put the slot in here is to kind of make it easier. In other words, if you've just got a hole going through it, and then you're kind of trying to move that joint back and forth, what's going to happen is with just that hole there, that band is going to want to bend in one direction and snap back a lot more than if it had a little bit of freedom of movement. So what you're doing is when you're cutting that little slot, what you're actually doing is you're giving that rubber band that's in there a little bit more freedom of movement to move back and forth inside the socket, right? So you've got it going this way, this way, this way, this way. Let me make sure, because I know you guys are always telling me that I'm way off. Yeah, good. So you can see what I'm drawing. Good. You're like an hour. Don't worry, Sarah. You're not an hour behind. I was an hour late, basically, trying to get all this stuff set up. So, yeah. The whole point of these slots, I think, is to give that a little bit of relief to the elastic that's holding the arms together. So it doesn't have a tendency to sort of like immediately snap back. So if I were to put pressure on this and it only had that point, it just snap right back. But if you've got these slots in here, I can kind of give this a little bit more of a move in one direction or another without worrying about that popping back into place immediately. So what I think that does is it gives it a lot more posability. You don't need the elastic to be so tight that, you know, the thing immediately like pops into position. You just need enough for it to allow it to hold together, but still give you a little bit of that freedom of movement. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a simple socket section. Like I demonstrated with the Gundam figure, you don't need a ball socket for there to be a ton of articulation. In some cases, like with Bandai and their Gundam models, they have an insane amount of articulation. The only problem is it costs a lot more money to make all of these little individual joints, right? And drill holes and rods, and I mean, there's to do the same thing that this does, they would need to have all of these points of articulation kind of like worked into this model. I mean, the pieces get really, really complicated, right? Just so they can get the same level of articulation. The advantage that this has over this type of setup is, one, if it's a robot, it just looks better on a robot than if you just had a bunch of ball joints on it. But also, I think the positioning, like this is sort of, it's very organic, it is, but you don't have to worry or be careful of these bands wearing out over time, which if you're a toy company, that's important. It allows for a little more adaptability. I think they can probably reuse a lot of these pieces, but some of their articulation, I think, it's more predictable, and it has a more rigid, because I mean, you can bend these figures, these ball jointed ones, into all kinds of crazy, you know, positions that don't even seem natural. The really most advanced one I've ever seen that Gundam put out, I'm trying to remember the name of the model. It was like a super flexible skeleton. Let me see here. Is it the Ashia frame? The 0G, I think, is what it was. Grade RX. It's either Grade RX or Grade RG. Let me see if I can find it. All right, so just to give you, it's kind of crazy. Let me pull this over. So just to give you an idea of what I was talking about, this is a Bandai Gundam mecha frame. This is the frame that goes underneath the plastic model. So, how many points of articulation do they have on this thing? Well, it's got a ton. Um, I'm just going to show you where first the ball joints are on this thing, and then the. Let me see if I can reduce the size of this just a little bit. So let's go here. Let me bring this down here so you can get the whole thing on the screen. I think that should be the whole model. All right. So this is where it gets crazy. And you can see a lot of these right off the bat. So there's a ball joint there, ball joint there. This is a double ball joint essentially. But from the looks of it, the way they built it is you can see there's also a pivot point right here. So this little tube is actually rotational in between these. So that allows it to go in that direction or, you know, that direction. They've got a small ball joint here, ball joints for each of the fingers, another ball joint there. They have double jointed sections for the knees. So there's an axis point for the knee. There's another one. There's another one for the foot section. There's one right here that goes through the center rod. There's one for a double jointed section for the arm. This is a point of rotation. This is a point of rotation. That's another point of rotation. You kind of get the picture. There's another one here. For ball joints, there's one there. Right? But there's also another double ball joint, which I don't understand why exactly, but I guess it helps. There's a double ball joint here. Well, not a double ball joint. I'd say this is a double socket. So you've got one that goes up this way that also, you know, the feet can rotate in or out in a circle. This can go in a circle. There's even a ball joint here for the armored flaps that go on the side. There's another point of rotation for the wrist, which I think there's another ball joint inside this little socket. It's an insane level of articulation. It's hard to, oh, you can't see the yellow? Okay, let's try, there we go, black. No, let's try green, purple. How about I do this? So yeah, these little circles all represent ball joints. All these lines represent axes and rod points, sort of like cylindrical rods. It's ludicrous how much articulation these things have, and it's amazing. I mean, you can even see there's what looks like another piece. These are all sections where the armor would attach and everything else. I mean, the head. This I'm not even really sure why they did this. So this is pretty common, but I guess they wanted to give it a sort of additional articulation in the neck area. So the head can rotate 360 degrees and swivel up and down, but to get that really awesome I'm flying through space Superman look, they allow the head to tilt all the way back or lean forward. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, so for my part, I think when I do my figures, specifically for the game I'm making, I'm probably going to go the route of of maybe like something like this. Mainly because of the scale. I think it might be fun to put some double ball jointed sections in there, like you know. But even for the robots, I mean, it's just. I mean, you guys are welcome to do whatever you like. I think it's just. It's an insane amount of work to do this many points of articulation on a robot, and I've seen people go that far, but it almost seems unnecessary when you've got something kind of a more simplistic way to do it here. You still get a lot of that. I think you get a lot of the efficiency and articulation of movement with these double ball jointed sections that you do with what they did with the rotational stuff here. I think that they really stuck to their guns on this for the reasons I cited before, which is, yeah, this is a lot more simple, but this is more in keeping with the robot. The ball socket sections are a little easier to deal with. The way they've designed it with these sort of half cups is pretty ingenious because it gives a lot more articulation and freedom of movement in different directions. It's a bit tighter if they engineer it or they make the pieces right. Believe it or not, Sarah, as far as the price, I've seen these BJD dolls just kind of scouring the last few days. They can get pretty pricey. They can go up to $80, $100 more. The trick is, though, this is actually a lot simpler, and in my opinion, something like this is a lot easier to make than something like this. Bandai didn't go this direction because it was cheaper. They went this direction because they liked the look of it better. It fits the look of a robot better. It allows for all the attachments in the armor. It looks techy. But also, and the thing about these is, this is all held together by one big rubber band straight from the torso all the way down to the leg. Same thing goes with the arms. One rubber band from the arm up to the part of the torso. And then, and that's for each leg. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 for the head, all the way straight down to the lower torso. And rubber bands, they break over time. They lose their elasticity. Having to dismantle a robot you spent hours or days or even weeks putting together, gluing and painting because a rubber band broke inside it, you can kind of understand why they went this route. So it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. There's a lot more pieces here, but also I think this allows for a lot more customization. If they want to add or subtract a piece from another figure, Bandai's done a really good job of making a lot of their model lines compatible with each other. So some that have different skeletons can have like legs removed or repurposed on another robot, or different types of armor added, depending on where these little hard points are to add the armor. So it's pretty cool, and that's why there's so many you'll see these little pegs kind of sticking out in some areas, or in this case there's some holes or slots in other sections of the robot, so that you can add on different types of armor and whatnot. So it's pretty cool in that respect. This is probably, for respectable folks, probably going to have a lot more clothes put on it. What I've seen with a lot of these BJD dolls lately is people have gotten real crazy with them. I mean, it's not even about just putting, like in this case, you can kind of tell this one's got shoes. But what I've seen is they're starting to sculpt directly onto the base, and in some cases they're even custom making a lot of these dolls. And some of the people that have customized them have even started selling like selling these customized versions as figures themselves. So let me see if I can find some. And they come in all shapes and sizes. It's pretty amazing. You don't have to be into dolls to appreciate the level of work it took to make these things. Just some examples, and forgive me if I don't have the names of the artists on these. I'm literally just kind of grabbing these at random to kind of give you an idea. But so this is a BJD doll somebody made. Let me see here. Let's see, and they like I said, they're getting pretty crazy. Let's see. Here's one that's kind of interesting. This one's it's pretty much the same concept, but this is from a toy company, an independent toy company. I'm trying to. You can probably find these on Amazon or different. This is a sort of more recent figure that I've noticed come up online. I forget what they call it, but it's like a universal robot. They're sort of marketing it as this, robot android toy figure. But you only have to take one look at it and understand after looking at one of these. It's basically a BJD doll, right? It's the same thing. They just kind of made it less Barbie and more Android to kind of get that look, right? So you still have this one. Looks like it's a single ball joint, but looks like they put a lot more articulation in the torso, sort of like I was describing earlier, where they added the articulation here. A little bit more articulation here, another double ball joint. This is not a ball joint though. This looks like a double hinged joint. There's a ball joint there with a little bit of a hinge in it. So it's kind of, I don't know, maybe best of both worlds. Yeah, it's a toy action figure, but essentially it's the same thing as the others. I'm trying to find some of the other BJDs that look really kind of just crazy amazing. Let's see. There's another one. So here again, this is pretty much the same thing as the thing to the right of it, but you've got. I mean, it's likely, except for this next section, this one looks almost exactly like the same figure. Here's another one. So they're getting pretty artsy with a lot of these. I'm trying to find, for you Star Wars fans, Ahsoka Tano figure. I mean, this isn't anything you can't find on your own online, of course. What I'm trying to find is some examples where they took it an extra step further and they really turned it into something more unique. So here's a 3D printed one. Oh, wrong one. Here we go. This is a little 3D printed BJD somebody did. They just did the parts online and made themselves a little robot. Oop, that one's really anatomically correct. Oh, I'm not going to show you that one. I don't want to get monetized, even though I'm not monetized. So this one's pretty cool. So here's a good example. So they took this one. They mod it. I don't know if they bought it this way. It could be they bought this original figure from somebody. But they sculpted a bunch of stuff on it. It kind of looks like they did their own little version of that Pan's Labyrinth creature, but it looks like what this is maybe epoxy sculpt. They just sculpted back onto the frame, and I've seen a lot of those where they buy the base frame and then sculpt onto it. Like I said, I think a lot of this can probably, this looks like maybe the original version of that. And I'm still looking for those really cool sci-fi ones, though, man. Those are, the ones I saw were pretty amazing. Oh, Yoda. So yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's possible to make these without too much. I wouldn't say without too much effort, but without a really high bar in terms of your skill set. It doesn't have to be hard. At least I don't think so. I think that it's entirely possible to go the route of, like I said, a lot of you are already accustomed to using beads. Taking two beads and attaching them somehow with either a wire or just glue, and then wrapping some Super Sculpey around them. Like I said, if you're not going to do Super Sculpey and you're not going to bake them, I am only saying to use wooden beads because, one, they're easier to drill through, more predictably, it's a softer material, and two, it's not quite as melty as plastic is if you end up baking it. I mean, you could probably. I was going to make some last night. I had a really late night. But you can easily get 2 large beads, and it doesn't even have to be large. I've been thinking about doing this on a much smaller scale. Let's say my hand's probably, I don't know. It's pretty big. Well, anyway, I'm thinking like the size of the figures I'm thinking of is maybe palm sized, which would be anywhere from like 3 to 3.5, 4 inches tall. I wouldn't have to go the route of using anything that large, but I think you can get 2 beads. You could either pre-drill some holes in them or connect them somehow to make your double bead. Just keep in mind the way they did theirs, or at least that I've seen, they're making that sort of peanut or lima bean shape that I mentioned. It's got a little bit of a curve to it, and I think that's primarily because it leaves a much more natural look to the figure. So what I'm doing here is, this would be the upper leg. This would be and you might put a more of an angle in here, right? This would be the lower section of the leg or arm. And then, there's this double bead, double ball joint that goes in the middle. And you can sculpt something that kind of fits into this little area. Yeah, I think it'd be pretty easy. If you really kind of wanted to avoid a lot of that, one of the things I was looking at, and I really have to get, sorry Silver, I know I was going to build that samurai. Other projects and stuff gets in the way, man. You get really Yeah, you don't want to be too melty, Spider. That's right. Too melty is bad. Unless it's cheese. And you know how I feel about cheese. Um, I think you can probably get away with doing this the easy way. It doesn't have to be the elastic drill section either. One idea I came up with was, here's your bead. Drill. Some of them already have holes drilled in them, so you know you're already halfway there. What you'll do is leave the hole as it is, right? So you've already got a hole that goes through the bead. Take a drill and drill a hole in the opposite direction. So basically what you end up with is kind of a crisscross of two holes. This one doesn't even have to be that big, right? So once you've got that one, you can put a piece of rubber band in here in one direction, put another piece of rubber band in the other direction, and then put a pin through that to hold those in place. So now you've already got your bands in there. So what I'm saying is, let me get a little clean section of paper. So what I'm essentially saying is, rather than what they're doing with the double ball joints, and they're making this sort of lima bean and then drilling a hole all the way through it, right? You're just cheating and making one ball joint, right? If you're doing a single ball, even easier. So you've got a bead, right, with a hole already in it. Actually, let's do this. Wrong direction. So you got a bead. Let's say this is the hole. Through your bead. And you're gonna attach upper limb with lower limb piece. You just get yourself inside the upper limb. You can use an eyelet screw or something that just creates a loop for the rubber band to go through. It could even be a hook if you want to just keep it simple. Put a hook on this one. And what you would do is, I think it'd be good to just kind of like drill a little socket or build something around it, make it a tube or whatever, for the bottom and top. You could take a wooden dowel, literally take a wooden dowel, sculpt, put a ball in there on top of the dowel, sculpt around that ball, right? Then take the ball out, and that'll leave you with this cup with a wooden dowel inside it. Then you take a screw with a little hook on it or whatever, and then what you're going to do is you can either rubber band it straight through, or if you just wanted it to be one section and you ended up doing it as a double ball joint, you could drill a hole for a rod, let the rubber band attach to that. I mean, there's so many different ways you can get away with this. VFX software. Oh, yeah, sorry, Silver. No, I was just saying, yeah, I've been meaning to finish that robot. I've just had a lot of stuff get in the way, and this is actually part of why I'm bringing this up in the first place. Is I was considering ways I could create posable joints for the robot. And one of the simplest ideas I could come up with, besides all these complicated ball joints, was I have my chopstick, I have my other chopstick, and then I just drill a little hole, drill another little hole, and just connect them by a wire. And literally, that would be my point of articulation, is my whole arm, leg, joint, bodies, they're all just connected by these thin wires. I get the skeleton, my little stick figure skeleton, and I just pose it into the pose I want, and then I sculpt around it, and then, nobody has to be the wiser. So yeah, that was my idea. All right, well, I've been on for an hour and 43 minutes. I hope I haven't completely bored you guys. I know most of you probably are well aware of how to do all of this already. But maybe there's some of you that hadn't thought of a way to do it effectively, or were thinking that, you don't want to spend almost $100 on a really expensive figure. I think there's ways to get around that. Certainly. The other thing I wanted to do was, and what I looked at is, you can start with very simple blocks of wood. Very, very simple shapes, just kind of like you see in these old how to draw manuals, where you've got an upper torso, you've got a lower torso, drill a couple of holes through them. You start with some blocks of wood, sculpt around the wood with your super Sculpey or whatever. Drill your holes this way and that way, and there's the basics. The basics for your figure, right? You've got all of the elemental parts of your model. Put a big ball in there in the middle if you want to have a nice articulating torso, and then put a little ball for the neck, which you sculpt a neck onto. Another ball here, another ball here. Next thing you know, you got your own figure that's fully posable. So yeah, I don't know. I hope that helps. I'm only suggesting the ball joint method because to me it's the easiest to get through. It's very good for organic shapes, especially if you're making creatures. I've seen even animals, ball jointed animals, rabbits, centaurs, you name it. Ball joint TED Talk, yeah. I think Bandai's take on and the G.I. Joe stuff, certainly there's a lot to be said about that type of articulation for those types of figures, and for those companies it works. But the reason I think a lot of the sort of homemade kits and these makers online, and why ball joints have I wouldn't say made a comeback, but they've sort of begun to proliferate the hobby scene over from the doll making scene, because they have. If you go to some of these garage kit sites where they have these super expensive resin figures that are, 1 of 100 or 1 of 300, you're going to see right next to them, there's going to be a BSD doll somewhere. I forget what the name of that artist was. I want to say Wendy something. There's a lady who's kind of made her living off of these sort of ball joint figures. She makes really cool ones too. I wish I could. I'm so terrible, guys. If I get that information, I'll post it in the comment section. But there are a lot of people that have gone to this type of connection for making figures and making sci-fi toys and stuff because it's super easy. I mean, it really is easy. It's a lot easier. It's easier to manufacture from that. I mean, from that standpoint. Yeah, you lose some of those or points of articulation that you get with the multiple hinges and rods, but I think for, like I said, like a lot of the organic stuff, I mean, this is really the way to go. I mean, all you really need, you don't even have to make the balls. I've seen people sculpt the balls out of Sculpey or epoxy. but you can just use beads. I mean, like I said, a lot of you are already using beads for all kinds of stuff. Why not start using them for making your own figures? But anyway, thanks, guys. I got a real busy day ahead of me, too, and I want to be able to try to catch Andy's stream as well before I have to head off to another event this weekend. So, thanks for coming in. I don't know how many of you there were, but, thanks for being patient with me starting late. For those of you that came in late, don't worry, you didn't miss much. I probably spent the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes just trying to figure out how to set up my camera. So I'll try harder on getting that sorted out. And in the meantime, thanks a lot. We'll talk again. Bye. Now I have to learn how